This is Kathy from Gadgets Top 321, and I was getting everything set up to do a writing test for Colorverse Einstein Ring. And I always begin by using my glass dip nib to write a little swatch in the monthly layout in my Hobonichi A6 planner. And then I'll do the writing test with all my pens on the corresponding day. Well, when I was doing my initial little swatch here, I noticed that the ink was kind of clumpy on the dip nib. And so when I checked my sample, I had to use a flashlight to get a good look at it. Yeah, you can see right there. It's not shiny on top. It's really scummy looking. And when I tested the smell of it, initially, it's been a few days ago that I did this. Initially, it didn't really smell like anything, and I was kind of surprised. I'd always heard that, oh, yeah, you'll know by the smell. But then when I smelled it this morning, it smelled like baby formula. It had a real, not right smell to it. Now, I will say, usually ink is going to smell like, have a paint smell to it, a chemical smell. But when I smelled this, like I said a few days ago, it didn't really smell like anything. That chemical smell had gone away. So then I started checking all my ink samples, and I found 3 more over here that look pretty scummy. I found 6 more that look kind of suspect, and let's see, and I found some like my Sailor Haha. I pulled it out, but now that I've gone back and looked at it, yeah, it looks nice and shiny. It Sailor Haha and a few other inks, if you can see there, it looks kind of green, but that's just some kind of optical phenomenon going on. It's a blue ink. It's one of those chroma shaders, and I think that's what I've noticed. Some of the chroma shaders, kind of refract the light kind of oddly, but it's nice and shiny. It doesn't look scummy. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Another one that I pulled that I don't think there's anything wrong with is my little bottle of writer's blood. I pulled it out because when I looked at it with the flashlight a few days ago, it looked kind of splotchy down in there, but I think that is just a reflection of drips on the side of the bottle. So watch for that too. You don't throw out all your ink. You may just be seeing reflections of ink drips on the side of the bottle. But before I throw this sample out, I'm not going to dip any of my pens that have feeds into this ink. But I guess I am going to go ahead and complete all my writing samples with my dip pen and do some swatches with my tweezers. And when I get done, instead of just dipping these two in water and wiping them off with a paper towel, I'll go wash them with some hot soapy water. Okay, you can see on all my other writing samples, I've got a little tweezer swatch. I'm going to try that, see if it works. Oh, yeah, that is bad. I don't know if this is going to work. Let's see. Maybe. Oh, yeah, that's bad. Okay, maybe I can scrape most of that scummy stuff. Yeah, there's just globs of it. Maybe I can dip most of the scummy stuff off. Yeah, that looks a little better. Let me wipe that off. This does not smell good. So to do these, I just pinch the tweezers together, dip it in the ink, and it collects some ink between the tines, kind of like the automatic pens that people are using. Yeah, there's a little clump of ink or clump of mold. This is a beautiful magenta. I'm disappointed that I'm going to have to throw this out, but it is not salvageable once you've got mold in it. Now, while that dries, I always set it to the side, and then I do a writing sample on rhodia paper, a little swatch of rhodia that I do my water resistance test. And then this is my, is it Tsubame? Yeah, my Tsubame ink collection cards. So I'm going to do my swatch for it. A nice crisp swatch, a little clump of mold there. When it dries, I'm probably going to wipe that off. I wonder if this is a bad idea to do this and keep this in with all my other ink collection cards. I'll have to think about that. Do a little swatch down here on the ink bottle. Okay. Now let's do a little bit with the dip pen. Yeah, I'm gonna wipe this off. You can see a little clump there. Yeah, this does not smell good. And I always do a little scribble over here to get that initial blob of ink. Okay, and this will be for my water resistance test. Normally, I do a writing sample with each of the pens from my pen and ink test. It's disappointing that I'm not going to be able to do this writing test because here lately I'm really enjoying these magenta inks in my Lamy CP1. And I think I am going to go ahead and do my writing sample that I normally would have done, but over here on the day page, but I'm not going to do a full A5 size sheet and put it in my Filofax. I've got a Filofax that I keep my A5 Rhodia writing samples. So this one might get contaminated, but at least the one that I keep more of an official record, and I refer back to them quite a bit. Before I flip the page, I'm going to let this dry a little bit, and then I'll do that other writing sample. Now, some of my suspect inks that are a little iffy, like my sample of Sailor Mano Kikyu, still has the chemical smell, but now that I'm looking at it, this may have been one. See how this is a really saturated ink and it's got drips on the sides of the bottle. I may have just been seeing reflections of those drips because this one doesn't look bad. Before I toss these suspect inks, I'll go back and reevaluate because I was on hyper alert after I found this one bad bottle. And I've gone back through, let me see. It seemed like a lot of the ones I was pulling out were purpley shades. My little sample of Kobe number 57 Himajasai. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's one of those that has the kind of green reflection to it. That's not the problem. It's not as bad as Einstein Ring was, but it does look a little scummy on top, and it has a chemical smell, but the chemical smell is more faint than some of the other inks I've been looking at. But, I guess how chemically it smells will vary from brand to brand. I need to dip my glass nib in here and see kind of what comes out, I think, before I throw it away. My sample of Cafe Crema was there's a lot of moisture in here that has evaporated up. And my samples, I just keep here on my desk. I've got a little cubby area. So I've got two of those trays, those test tube trays that are kind of pushed back in the back. And then I've got one kind of setting up here in the front. And let me see. I can probably show you my setup. And I think all the ones that were definitely bad I pulled out of this front tray. I may need to look at how I'm storing my samples. But my Robert Oster Cafe Crema has drips on the side, so I don't want to. Yeah, now that I'm looking at it, it's nice and shiny. I think I was just seeing reflections of those drips. Let me see what it smells like. I don't smell hardly any chemical smell at all. I don't smell hardly anything out of this one. I'll check it with my glass dip nib. And the last one that I thought might be bad was Sailor Shigeru Yamadori. Let's see what it looks like. Yeah, and it's not looking too bad. And it has a decently strong chemical smell. So maybe I was just overly cautious when I started pulling all these inks out. I'll go back and check all of them, but this one was definitely bad. Let's see. I think this is dry now. Oh, it's got a nice sheen right here in this drip. Yeah, see that gold sheen? Nice. This reminds me of, yeah, Noodler's Cactus Fruit Eel, but Noodler's Cactus Fruit Eel didn't really have any sheen. That's nice. So for my full writing samples, I dip my pen, glass nib, and do a scribble to get that first blob of ink off. Do a little tight scribble here in case there'll be some sheen. And then I do a swatch with my tweezers. This is nice and crisp and really holds to the paper. This little skip here was me getting it at a wrong angle. And it didn't leave much of a drip down here, so I'm going to, since I'm not doing writing samples today, I'm going to do a little heavier swatch. Okay, now I'm going to give that a little time to dry. And while that dries, I'm going to get everything set up for the water resistance test. Okay, now I'm going to do the water resistance test. I'll speed this up, but I'm going to leave this in the water for 10 minutes. It looks like Colorverse Einstein Ring doesn't really have any water resistance. I do see maybe enough that you might be able to recover what you've written, but I wouldn't consider this water resistant. Well, now that I have an ink collection card, I guess I can do some ink comparisons. Roaring Klinger Solferino looked like it was the closest match. Noodler's Cactus Fruit Eel is pretty close, but it's got a little more red in it than these two do. And so did Noodler's Black Swan and Australian Roses. A little more red and maybe a little less saturated or a little more pale, at least in that swatch. Iroshizuku Yamabudo also looks a little more red, but it looks a little darker than the Black Swan and Australian Roses. And if you like this magenta color, but you want something a little more subdued, Sailor Mano Akebi. Yeah, it's quite a bit more red, but also a nice magenta. Out of the inks that I just compared, it looks like Solferino, Akebi, and Yamabudo are the ones that are going to be most likely to sheen. Akebi looks like the most sheeny. Okay, on my Tomoe River paper from my Hobonichi, I'm not seeing that much sheen. I was expecting a little bit more from the original tweezer swatch back at the beginning, but even on this heavy little swatch here, just very little sheen. So I wouldn't expect to see any sheen using this ink in a nib, but it is a very beautiful ink. And you can see the globs of stuff that was floating on top of the ink now that the ink is dried. If you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel.